Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Today we are playing Hassassin Bahram versus Ariadna, and the scenario is B-Pong. Now, as a quick note, B-Pong is a scenario that was kind of maligned when it first came out, and so if you had a visceral response to me just saying B-Pong right now, I would encourage you to actually go back and take a look at the most current version of the scenario. It wasn't changed hugely, but the scoring in particular was reworked in, I think, just this ITS season. And these days it plays much more like a hybrid of acquisition and supremacy, with lots of little end of round scoring actually on the static objectives being just as important as the B-Pong itself. It is not about the tug of war over the early turns so much as it is about just holding those positions and being willing to make sacrifices to do so. It's like 3-turn acquisition now, and that's actually kind of cool for a scenario, so I was glad to finally be able to sit down and play it in N5. Now, in terms of lists for both players, myself and my regular opponent Aaron, this is not tournament prep or practice. We are both doing what I would kind of call weapons testing, where we are just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Each of these are just lists to test different concepts. In my case, I'm playing Hassassin Bahram, and one of the things I highlighted and have played with Hassassins previously is that they are very capable of doing an ambush tactic style of play. One of the things I wanted to just try and see, because that's not a style of play that comes naturally to me, is if I could hybridize it a little bit. I like taking the more muscular elements in Hassassin Bahram, being able to do some door kicking, a little bit of longer range gunfighting, which they're not fantastic at, but can do, and see if I could get those elements into a list, but also have a pretty solid asymmetric scenario ambush, reactive or active turn ambush style of play, have my cake and eat it too. So there are some things in this list that are kind of missing. There are no Hassassin for days, for example. Part of that is because I am basically intending, to the extent possible, to go second. And so we are building to resist and ablate the Alpha Strike, and then respond with a mix of specialists who can advance into or already positioned in the midfield, gunfighting, including both just regular active turn gunfighting and ambush gunfighting, and some visibility control to make sure that we can play scenario. This list is built at least a little bit with B-Pong in mind. I wouldn't take this, for example, into a scenario like Decapitation, where the absence of Hassassin for day is just leaving money on the table. But as an experiment for this game, I was kind of looking forward to playing it. So what we have is 2 Asawira just to start with. Now, my experience with these over the course of this edition is that the boarding shotgun is excellent and the AP Spitfire is kind of okay. That's not really a consequence of the frenzy, it's just a consequence of the Asawira AP Spitfire has kind of always just been kind of okay from me. It's a model that consistently performs fine, it has no visual mods, it has no ways to ignore visual mods. Trying to get it to gunfight has never been something that I have really enjoyed as much as many people did historically with Vanilla Hackislam, for example, in N4, but it is still a sound and a reasonably costed piece with a whole bunch of bells and whistles that make it quite good. The boarding shotgun profile, however, that is ace. They are both wildcards. They can both be wildcarded into a selection of link teams, and this list has very flexible link teams. Because we've got Layla Sharif and a Govad, those can form a Bahram duo, or Haris, or Core if you want to add the Asawiri in, or both of those can jump into a Ghulam team, and we have multiple Ghulams and multiple Barids to build Ghulam teams around. Now, to note, the Govad HMG is a piece I've tried out a few times because one of the things I like to have access to is just some HMG range firepower, please. And the Govad is actually pretty playable in Hassassin Bahram these days. It got some little buffs in N5. It's eminently serviceable. Layla Sharif I've spoken about previously. Primarily, she is a Sixth Sense hacker. I did not know I was going to be playing into Ariadna. Had I, absolutely would not have taken all of this hacking stuff, but that is one of the few advantages that Ariadna has in N5, is that just like they did in N4, they kind of circumvent many of the pieces your opponent might bring to play a more standard game, hacker versus hacker, gun versus gun. And so we have Layla and we have 2 Barids. Those are sunk costs in this particular matchup, but hey, they'll be fine in others. Finally, rounding out the first combat group, we have a Hassassin AR. This is kind of the preferred AR profile. It is, I think, the most expensive, but you've got a Burst 4 AP rifle, a Burst 3 E-Meta, a Burst 4 viral pistol. It's a good set of firepower that can leverage triangulated fire just to do quite a lot. We have a Camille, just one source of baggage because there are a couple of elements in this list that will need reloading. We are not going to make significant use of pitches, but being able to reload pitches is nice. More importantly though, there's a Matalia in group 2, and being able to just reload the jammer gives you a lot more freedom in terms of firing it off in ARO. In group 2, we have our ambush package, basically. We've got 2 Shujays, both with EM mines, Flamen Spears, submachine guns. Now, I have experimented with the shock mine boarding shotgun profile, and I don't mind it, but one of the things I want to be able to do is drop out of hidden deployment and fire a Flamen Spear, and that's not an option that the boarding shotgun Shujay has. So, mileage may vary. The EM mine profile, I believe, is more popular, and for a reason. We then have 2 Dalami and a Matawiya with chain rifle and jammer. I'm actually leaning a little more toward this specific Dalami profile in many lists. Sorry, this specific Matawiya profile in many lists these days, just because Matawiya are not fantastic at throwing smoke, and if you want smoke and a jammer on a profile, you have to start paying, well, I mean, like 2 more points. But the boarding shotgun on Matawiya as well is kind of just okay. I am pretty comfortable just paying for the discount chain rifle and jammer these days, particularly if there is baggage in the list. I think you get most of what you need out of that profile. And with visibility control now accessible in Hassassin Bahram, in particular from both the Ghulam and the Asawira, which are linked, much more reliable, etc. The Asawira also brings Eclipse. I think the requirement that Matawiya be able to throw smoke is sort of a thing of the past. If you've got a couple of points spared, sure, it's a wonderful luxury. But I actually almost value a chain rifle more highly than a boarding shotgun on a jammer-style Matawiya. And so saving the points is saving the points. I don't think any of the Matawiya profiles are necessarily obsolete. All of them have a use case, but in this case, the one jammer is very useful in the list, particularly given the matchup. Now, as noted, this list is stretching a little bit in a kind of have its cake and eat it too kind of way. It's trying to be able to do ambush tactics, scenario play, link team stuff, etc. And it would probably benefit from being a little more focused on any of those. But as far as a weapons testing list, where I just get to try out a bunch of different things, immerse myself a little bit more in the ambush style, actually finally get around. This is the first game that I've actually gotten around to using an AR in Hassassin Bahram, well overdue. A perfectly serviceable list for that kind of thing. If you wanted to take this and adjust it yourself, yes, it is very amenable to adjustment. It's trying to cover lots of different bases at once. It's a bit unfocused as a result, and so focusing it is something that would benefit from in terms of if you want to take it and make adjustments to it. In a very similar vein, my opponent Aaron's Ariadna list. Aaron has been jumping back and forward between factions, trying different things over the course of N5, getting a good sampler of basically everything the game has to offer, and so on that round tour, this is his game getting into Ariadna. Now, the kind of general consensus, and I don't think it's unreasonable, is that Ariadna is kind of okay, I guess, maybe, in N5. And if we were to peel back that emotional response and actually look at why that might be, it's really not hard to see how Ariadna has been left behind a little bit by the balance updates that N5 has seen. In N5, hackable heavy infantry really are getting a discount for being hackable. If you are willing to grapple with that limitation of them, and it is a limitation, you're able to get quite a lot for relatively few points, lots of wounds, lots of capability, because for kind of the first time ever in Infinity's history, heavy infantry are appealing and attractive relative to their points cost in the same way that cheap stuff historically has been. What that has meant is that, once again, the left behind pieces are single wound, pseudo elite, medium, and light infantry. Now, medium infantry have always kind of been that piece, maybe in N6. Maybe N6 will be the medium infantry edition for Infinity. But right now, Ariadna especially is in that spot where all of the things that were buffed in the game were not Ariadnan things. And so Aaron's actual takeaway, a message that he sent me after this game was, man, you know what? Paying like 20 points for single wound thing, that's some peasant shit. And yep, fair enough. Ariadna is trapped a little bit right now in this is some peasant shit zone. And while they're not unplayable, they are pushing that uphill a little bit. Now, to jump into Aaron's list, it is kind of similarly, it's a sample platter of a bunch of the things that he wanted to try. It's rocking a full 6 SWC, it's actually going to outshoot my list by a kind of solid margin, but it, like me, is stretching itself a little bit thin in order to cover multiple bases, to try lots of different things. So we can see, just to start with, Dynamo Paramedic and a Dynamo. Now, one of the things that Vanilla Ariadna does have going for it is some kind of serviceable duo and Haris teams, and the Dynamo is one of those. So we've got a specialist, boarding shotgun, smoke grenade launcher. Linked smoke grenade launchers are good smoke grenade launchers. And then we just have the cheapest possible Dynamo. Both of these have got mine dispensers, but very short range on their attacks otherwise. I don't know for sure whether there is a good argument for taking the AP Spitfire Dynamo. It is a limited cover model. You're basically rolling the dice on 5 dice, mimetism, no cover. It's not the worst kind of weapon in the world, but maximizing the utility of this duo maybe is a little bit tricky. We've then got a Haris team, 2 Frontoviki and a veteran Kazakh lieutenant. Now the veteran Kazakh lieutenant is a very expensive piece. APHMG is a very nice weapon. It's only ballistic skill 13, and it's paying an awful lot of points kind of for the privilege of being unhackable. It does have a kitchen sink of skills, several of which are going to be extremely relevant this game. But it is very easy to compare it to what 44 points might get you in other factions, and really not be 100% sure on whether it's worthwhile. It is still a 1 SWC gun, which matters in this particular list, and it just joins a Haris team kind of comfortably of the 2 Frontoviki. So we've got a Frontovic heavy rocket launcher, a Frontovic paramedic with T2 rifle. Those are reasonably costed. Frankly, the 19-point HRL, that's very serviceable. The paramedic is beginning to get a touch expensive. If you look at what 23 points would buy you in another faction, it would buy you a heavy infantryman. Now, that heavy infantryman probably wouldn't have mimetism, for example, but it would probably also have higher ballistic skill than 12. So this is a perfectly serviceable little Haris team, but it's where we start to see those points cost that Ariadna pays begin to add up in a way that they didn't in previous editions. We've then got the Unknown Ranger, another freshly nerfed element, but he is a tactical awareness, AP Spitfire, mimetism, decent armor piece. Like, he's fine, but he's just fine, whereas in previous editions he was kind of a banger. We've got a Tractor Mule, 5 points for an order and for reload. The Tractor Mule will be there in particular to play around with the dynamos and let them reload their mine dispensers. A Chernobog pilot, because it is a 9-point regular order and a specialist. And then a Dog Warrior. Now, Dog Warriors are pieces that have kind of always been a little bit mid, mostly because they've been outshone by other better dog-faced troops that were available to different factions. That availability has been revoked, so Dog Warriors are what you've got, and, well, okay, look, 24 points does get you 3 wounds. It's not... The problem with Dog Warriors has always been that actually just connecting with any of their attacks, they don't have fantastic close combat, they don't present a really dangerous fork in terms of they've got a chain rifle and grenades, but if your opponent dodges, you just have to throw a grenade at them. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not the best either. Connecting with them has always been kind of a challenge when you have to deliver them across the field to begin with, and they only deliver themselves so quickly because they begin life as a 4/4 piece before they transmute. Now, all of those are kind of nominal downsides, but it is still 24 points for 3 wounds with total immunity. It's not the kind of piece that I would necessarily reach for first in a this must win a tournament kind of list, but I wouldn't be reaching for Ariadna in the first place. And as a weapons testing piece, this is the kind of thing that you want to try out in the new edition. Hey, how good is 3 wounds with total immunity for 24 points these days? Has that changed? Has the needle on that shifted? Is the sheer annoyance of killing these things once they get into the midfield kind of worth it? How do I want to use a piece like this these days? In Combat Group 2, we've then got Nauf, very serviceable gunfighter, technically buffed marginally over the course of editions. He's fine, and he gets you an MSV and mimetism and a decent ballistic skill and burst. In a faction like Ariadna, he's higher value than he might be elsewhere. A Tank Hunter, Chain of Command, AP rifle. This is a sound little gunfighter that is reasonably dangerous, and importantly, because we're going to get pretty active with the veteran Kazakh, just provides a layer of insurance. Now, you could very easily replace this if you were so inclined with a Zenit, basically a very comparable profile. But the Zenit Chain of Command is a full 4 points more expensive, and so the downgrade I think here is quite reasonable. Yes, AP rifle rather than marksman rifle, but particularly if you've picked up an LT order, that's not too challenging to make use of. This is just kind of a sound backup in case you want to use the veteran Kazakh offensively, and especially with the way that lieutenant orders work in terms of fire teams, where you can comfortably spend that LT order to do something, and then just drop back into the fire team in the states phase. You have access to active lieutenants even if they are linked in this edition, a very nice quality of life change. Having the chain of command piece just makes a degree of sense. We've then got a Strelok Forward Observer, just a really solid value piece for 17 points. and 2 Highlanders who are also going to be duoed. Now they will break the duo pretty quickly, but you have that option just for a little bit of order efficiency or smoke efficiency, etc., what have you. So a reasonable mix. There's like 5 camouflage markers between the Chasseur and the Strelok in this list, but this is actually kind of gun Ariadna primarily, with a bit of speed, a bit of ability to face check, just generally kind of okay and well-rounded. We can absolutely see the weaknesses of Ariadna on display here. By God, that's a lot of single wound stuff. But there are also pieces that are dogged or no wound incapacitation or just have multiple wounds. This is some resilience built into an Ariadna list. It's also very sound at gunfighting. The gunfighting that it presents would cause significant issues for me over the course of the game. And so while I don't wholly recommend Ariadna, there is plenty that was worth testing in this list. Now, rolling on into the game, we are both rocking Willpower 14 Lieutenants after 2 failed rolls from each of us. Aaron wins the roll. I would really liked to have won and picked Deployment side, but in this particular case, Aaron wins, Aaron picks Deployment side, and I do something that I would encourage all of you never to do. I just straight up raw dog and say I'm going second. This means Aaron is going to have full deployment advantage to see how I am deployed, and then a full first turn to capitalize on that deployment advantage. This is very much a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, but I have built my list with the explicit intention of it being able to play from second, and so I want to play second. I'm not really hugely confident in this list going first. I think it could under some circumstances, but it's not optimized for it. And especially in this scenario, B-Pong is one of only a couple of scenarios that have not just end of game scoring, but multiple rounds of end of round scoring. The advantage that going second offers is quite material in B-Pong. And so I am going to suck it up. I am going to accept the risks that come from deploying first and going second. And we're going to see if we can weather the strength of the storm that comes. Now, again, 95% of people in the audience watching, don't do this. Do not do this. It is not worth it. There are many players that are very good at Infinity, and they will blow you out if you give them the ability to counter all of your deployment and then use that to launch an offensive. Do as I say, not as I do, but let's see how this goes. So I'm deploying first. Aaron has given me the weaker of 2 table sides. And by the weaker of 2 table sides, what we mean here is we can see the objectives here, here, and then just behind, it's underneath and behind this balcony. These are all comfortably more accessible from my opponent's side of the table. They are easy, in particular, they are easy to put guns on. They are easy to overwatch. They are difficult to grab. And this objective on the bottom side of the screen in particular is very hard to get to. Now, I do have a means of doing so, and I'm going to attempt it over the course of the game, but this is not a scenario where with this table side it's easy for me to access these objectives, so fair play. There is, it should be noted, an alleyway that leads between these 2 buildings that does allow access to this objective on the top side of the screen, but that's it. That's the only side objective that I have easy access to, and the side objectives are just as important as the B-Pong itself in this mission. So in terms of deployment, I'm going to reserve drop a mine layer Hassassin Bahram, but we'll just run through all of my deployment and all of my opponents, and it is, as you might expect, a mess of camouflage markers close to the halfway line. There is a small exclusion zone in B-Pong, which I really like. I think more scenarios would warrant from that. Like, it's just 4 inches either side of the table. You can still play plenty of games with infiltration. You just can't start right there, which I really like. But what we've got is the yellow camouflage markers are Mimetism 0. So we've got 2 Delami. Now, they're deployed in positions where they've got kind of like reasonable... one of them has very aggressive overwatch. The other is deployed with kind of longer lanes in mind. They are deployed just to look like they could potentially be a Sundukbut. If this is a Sundukbut, then this one would be a fake. You would never put a Sundukbut. It's the AP Spitfire does not range well from that position. This one that's hanging out behind would be the real one. So it's like, oh, hey, just be aware. It's just that trying to create a little bit of obfuscation and fog of war. Now that's going to last almost no time whatsoever throughout the game, but it's just, I'm stacking my defenses in any case in this top corner, just because I need to build a center of strength somewhere, and also I'm terrified of the possibility of Equip Mirage. That's something I didn't consider. When I just straight up picked, I'm going to go second, and then I began to deploy, and then I realized that I had absolutely zero knowledge about my opponent's list whatsoever. Now, normally you can look at an Ariadna deployment, right? If you are deploying second, going second, and you can go, approximately how many pieces do I think are missing? And if there are two SWC and a few more pieces missing than you might like, you can make some assumptions about how necessary it is to defend from Equip Mirage. If you are deploying first and going second, you just have to assume that they're coming. You just have to, because if you don't, and they are, you will lose the game on the spot immediately and irrevocably. Right? If you deploy poorly against Equip Mirage because you had no idea if they were coming and you assumed that they didn't, and then they arrive, your ancestors will feel how badly you lost that particular game. So I have to set up, not just watching forward, but also watching backwards. This is possibly the most stressful deployment I think I've ever done, outside of tables that were just cooked because they were bad tables. But anyway, what we do is we build as best we can a position of strength kind of across this part of the table here, with lots of ample overlapping fields of fire. The Gulam and the Asawira and the Barid are all going to be hanging out and around this building here, with they're all going to be linked apart from the Gulam Lieutenant. They're going to be watching each other as best they can. Now, this is not actually proof against Durok in particular. These guys are all just rolling 1 dice plus 1 special die. They can't put Durok down the turn that he arrives. But the idea is that there are enough overlapping fields of fire, and there are Dalamis, and there are some other hidden elements that, in an absolute pinch, we can stop a Durok attack, even though in this case we've seen the list, we know that one isn't coming. I had to treat the threat as real. A couple of also things that are worth noting. The Asawira AP Spitfire is going to be on ARO duty, but he's just going to be peeking out so that he can see anything coming down over this building here. That's just a sensible precaution. I don't necessarily expect it, but it would be a path into my deployment, and I don't want to deal with that, so he's just watching that position. And then, of course, we've also got all of the other models positioned with overlapping fields of fire as well. The Matawiya is not visible in this picture, but he's going to be just on the stairs of this building here behind this tree. Importantly, that's in zone of control of the baggage bot here, so that if I need to, the Matawiya can reload, which means he can freely fire off his jammers. Really nice change in N5. That is going to be very relevant because a couple of the best paths into my deployment zone would take the model down and around that particular building, so the zone of control is very pertinent there. We've then got on this side of the table, Layla Sharif is hanging out behind these trees, and the Govad is behind this building. The Govad is watching the long line up and down the table, and then the Asawira is watching the Govad's back. So these are mutually overlapping fields of fire. Again, this would not stop Durok if he turned up, because 1 dice and 1 special die is not going to do it, but there are some other insurance pieces we've got around there. The Shujai are deployed, so the first one is deployed in the alleyway behind this building, ready to move up onto this objective. The other Shujai is deployed just behind the rotor thruster on this vertibird thing, just kind of inside the nook behind the mine, and then of course there are 2 EM mines and 2 EM mines. Finally, the Hassassin AR is deployed standing on these stairs, and that's going to end up being an absolutely terrible deployment, as we'll see when we get onto Aaron's side of the field. And the reason for that is that Aaron is like, okay, cool, I don't think you've got, his position was basically, you don't have that many guns. I have many guns. This is going to be your problem now. And so his reserve drop was Nauf, but in terms of the firepower position he establishes, we have a standing veteran Kazakh lieutenant, a standing Nauf, the decoy will be around here somewhere but isn't important, and then a standing heavy rocket launcher Frontovic. Now, there are a few things that are worth noting about this. The first is that all 3 of those pieces have line of fire to my Hassassin AR were it to reveal in turn 2. The second thing is that, do you want to know what the Hassassin AR is not good against? It is not good against a veteran Kazakh in a link team, because the veteran Kazakh natively is immune to surprise, and natively is immune to isolation, and natively is durable enough to weather armor-piercing round shots from the rifle, because the rifle is not a particularly high-damage weapon. The AR is a 40-point piece that is not going to dislodge any of this stuff efficiently. If it reveals at the wrong place at the wrong time, it's just going to die, which is not what you want from a model that costs well over 10% of your entire army. Now, under normal circumstances, this wouldn't be an issue. You would deploy the AR with a fair bit of an idea as to what it is that your opponent has positioned. But I, in my infinite wisdom, chose to deploy first and go second. So here we are. I have basically reduced 40 points of my army to, can I ARO at some point, then I hope it gets lucky, which is not what you want from one of your premier elements. Still, it is what it is. There is a big firepower presence on this building that Aaron is going to make full use of. Now, he is aware of the fact that putting multiple pieces together like this, if he wants to activate any one of them, particularly the link team, right? 2 standing link team members both on ARO, okay, fine, well and good, but in active turn, for example, if they went after these camouflage markers and they turned out to be Delamy, that would produce a situation where the Delamy would be able to ARO against a different piece that isn't the active gunfighter. Therefore, to counteract that risk, the two Galwegians are hanging out down here, and their job is, among other things, going to be to get smoke down wherever smoke is needed to ensure that Aaron can safely activate the link team without suffering bad AROs. Good forethought there. Otherwise, the dynamos will be down here in this corner, the tractor mule will be on the rooftop, relatively safe, in a position where the dynamos can reload. The unknown ranger will be hanging out just down behind the tractor mule, ready to move up as needed. He does still have his tactical awareness order, etc. And the camouflage markers, we've got the tank hunter down behind this building. The Strelok forward observer is occupying this space. This is a fairly bold face, like this is the decoy. I am not going to give it any respect the entire game, because it sure as hell looks like a decoy to me, but we do over here have one standing and one prone camouflage marker, which is going to be a chasseur and the mine. Now, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a pretty fair guess that one of these is a mine and one of these is not, because the one that's not is prone. But these are pieces that are ready and able to move out on first turn. Speaking of first turn, as noted, Aaron has the first turn advantage here. Now, this is going to be one of those turns, and this will happen from time to time, where a cheap, irregular troop just bails the Hassassin player out of the, they just bail them out. They just bail them the fuck out of the game that otherwise might have been in a terrible position. And that is because Aaron puts respect on the Delamy. Now, this is a sensible thing to do, particularly if the pieces that you want to move forward are vulnerable to getting hit and killed by a Panzerfaust. Right? Who amongst us has not at some point taken a premier flagship tag and walked it out into the open, looking to bait out your opponent's Mimetism 0 piece, only to have something like a Delamy reveal, crit you, and toilet bowl the entire game because you didn't treat them with respect. Now, if those are the pieces that you're using, yes, you do need to put a degree of respect on things like the Delamy's name, but Aaron is in a position where he has a much better tactic to use. Now, what he should have done was kind of just full send. One of the best ways to deal with an asymmetric, ambush-based, camouflage, mine layer defense like the one I'm using, if you have pieces that are genuinely expendable, is to just offer it no respect whatsoever. If I drop a Nadir out of hidden deployment, if I drop a Delamy out of camouflage, to ARO against something like a Galwegian running at me, then you are in a very real sense just kind of trading up, particularly since those pieces are in no way guaranteed to deal with a dodging Galwegian. It's dodging on 14s. They're often going to be shooting on 14s or 15s themselves. EM mines that I'm packing in this matchup as well are kind of the same thing. If an EM mine clips a Galwegian and it fails to dodge, okay, cool. The Galwegian is your opponent's problem now. And so if or when you have the pieces that you can just send on that kind of run, just doing that as the first turn of the game, being like, yep, no respect to any of your crap whatsoever, you have to reveal this shit to stop me, I'm going to run this 5-point piece at you, and if you don't drop out of camouflage to deal with them, well then I'm going to dodge your mines, and I'm going to come around corners, and I'm going to do things like pull a Galwegian up and around this corner here, and then into your single wound, relatively elite Layla Sharif and Govad fire team and put them down with my 5-point element. That's what Aaron should have done this turn, but knowing that that is the play really does require to an extent a degree of meta knowledge about what your opponent is taking. And also, frankly, kind of requires balls of steel, because you are making, in a very real sense, a sacrifice play. What Aaron did instead is decide basically on the cautious approach and to just unpick the elements that he could see before him, just deal with what was on the table, and then rely on the fact that he had kind of a dominant firepower position to make the game difficult for me in my reactive turn. That is not necessarily an unsound approach, except that it opens the door to the Delamy effect. Now, the Delamy effect can also be the Matalia effect or the Libertos effect or whatever, depending on the faction that you are playing. But what happened this game was that Aaron failed a discover roll, and then failed a discover roll, and then fail the discover roll, and then fail the discover roll, and then when the Dalami finally dropped out of ARO to take a shot against, I think, a biker, Nauf then failed to kill the Dalami, didn't die himself, but the Dalami passed both saves against the one hit Nauf got through and ended up prone on a rooftop. And that is just a great, great number of orders to spend, accomplishing really not enough. And Aaron remarked on this, and very reasonably so. But as we're going to see from his second turn, when he does basically ball up his courage and just take a swing at my lines, he's not going to do enough damage on the first turn, and that's going to have knock-on effects for the rest of the game. Now, he does still have a reasonable number of orders, despite the fact that the Dalami toilet bowled 5 or 6 orders out of his turn. The Dynamos are eventually going to move up and around and begin to push forward, at which point I will drop a Nadir out of hiding to try and ambush them. I actually hit, the pie plate clips both of them, but tragically, both of them pass their saves and split, at which point they basically stay where they are rather than risk further shots. The Chasseur, however, now has a prey that they're not bad at dealing with, and so the Chasseur, particularly with the Dalami dislodged, the Chasseur is going to move out, come down the stairs. I've got no... I could drop something out of ARO to deal with it, but that would... Like, there are still some orders in Aaron's first combat group. He's still got the Lieutenant order, for example. I don't want, I'm not under any circumstance going to reveal something like the Hassassin AR, for example. And I also don't particularly want to reveal this Nadir down here, because, like, it could theoretically survive shots. It is Mimetism 6, right? It could theoretically survive shots, but Nauf is too much of a good face-to-face roll against it. There's just nothing that I really want to drop out of hidden deployment or camouflage to engage. I was willing to drop out with the Nadir because it is safe, right? It's sitting in this alleyway back here. I could safely drop it out of hidden deployment and make an ambush attack because it's not vulnerable to any of Aaron's guns. But everything else, because I had to deploy first, I unintentionally deployed into a fairly nasty firepower position. I am hindered in how I can drop things out of hidden deployment and ARO. So the Chasseur comes down and around. It's going to put a flamethrower into the Nadir. The Nadir will pass its save. It will try and shoot the Chasseur. Or no, it tries to dodge because it's a difficult shot either way. It succeeds its dodge, pulls back into cover, but the Chasseur is sitting on this objective, which is potentially some points for Aaron. So if we jump forward to the beginning of my first turn, we can see the Chasseur hanging out in this little position here. The only sort of position here that is a little bit rough is that the dog face is somewhat in the open. It used its impetuous and irregular orders to move forward, and then didn't really have anything that it subsequently wanted to do, and there weren't orders spare for it to accomplish anything else. There are a bunch of Galwegians that have moved forward into a good staging position, so this Galwegian and this Galwegian have moved forward with a combination of their impetuous and irregular orders. They were actually used to try and take some discover rolls against yonder distant. They were some of the models that failed their discover rolls against the Dalami on the rooftop. Not unsurprising, right? At that distance with their willpower, but it was worth having a crack with them. But ultimately, I have rolled into my first turn in a fairly ideal position. I have sustained no casualties, and I am in striking distance of objectives. The problem is that there is this honking great Ariadna of all things firebase that I'm not really in position to contend with. Now, the Govard in a Link team is actually not too bad at taking any of those individual gunfights. Mimetism goes a pretty long way here, and it does have the potential to move up and like slice the pie by moving up this set of stairs here. That will take it into line of fight, first of Nauf, then of the front of Vicky, then of the veteran Kazakh. But I'm not going to win the scenario doing that. There are other things that are very important to accomplish, and some of those, like I have to get bottles onto objectives, I have to start scoring points. I am going second specifically for that advantage, and so we're going to see what we can do. Now, because Nauf is up and standing over here and represents an MSV ARO piece that's got a fairly nasty line kind of down here, we are going to make this run with the Asawira. And so, kind of as usual, it's the 30.3-point Asawira that is going to do all of the work. Now, right now, that pair is in a fire team of 1 Ghulam, 2 Hassassin Barids, and 2 Asawira. But we are basically just going to do a trick I kind of like doing, which is leave everything but the Asawira behind. Sometimes I will use the NCO Ghulam, or like maybe 1 Barid if I think I need a specialist, and come along with them. But in this case, I have no interest in doing anything specialist related almost until the end of the game. You don't need specialists to control consoles, you don't need specialists to control the B-Pong itself. And so everyone else is going to drop out of the link, and my Ghulam duo, consisting of 2 Asawira, is going to move up and around. It's going to put down 1 disco ball here and 1 disco ball here. I think I use it's the most important one to land is the one that covers the chasseur, so I use my special die on that. And then they just run up into this alleyway, and the boarding shotgun Asawira absolutely murks the chasseur and then sits on the objective itself. The Spitfire will stay behind cover in the alley, just sort of like watching up this lane. That isn't necessarily ideal. I think I could probably have had it further back to be more useful later, because I have kind of signed both of their death warrants. You'll see why shortly. But cool, for now, Chasseur dead, and I am on an objective. Excellent. Now, this leaves us a few orders to try and accomplish a few other things, and we're going to split our focus a little bit, but this is where kind of one of the weaknesses of this style of list, the ambush style of list, does emerge. I, personally, am used to playing with large order counts, usually at least 15, sometimes 16, sometimes 17, if you can get tactical awareness and lieutenant orders, etc. This list has many models that want to be in hidden deployment, and many of the ambush tactics Hassassin Bahram lists have even more. You might have 5 models in hidden deployment in some cases, and it's really important to be disciplined about revealing those, not bringing them out until it's going to make a big difference. This just very naturally means you have slightly fewer orders to play with. Now that is something that you can learn, right? Good Hassassin Bahram players, experienced Hassassin Bahram players, develop those instincts for how to spend orders very efficiently and only pursue mission objectives that they need to. I am used to being able to split my time between stepping on the neck and accomplishing objectives because I bring large order count lists, but large order count lists play much more face up. I've got fewer potential for example, ambush plays. Now, in this game, I have frittered away some of my ambush potential by just hard going second. The Hassassin AR is still sitting in this position up here because it cannot reveal itself against the guns that are staring it down. But because it can't reveal itself, not only is it 40 points that isn't doing anything, it's not generating an order either. So we have marginally more constrained play patterns, but the Govad is still going to move up and around and take a little bit of gunfighting. All he will have time to do is put Nauf unconscious, but he will put Nauf unconscious. He's also going to, sorry, as part of that, it'll be around this way first and then back, because I want to put shots into the Dog Warrior, and he does. He puts a few shots into the Dog Warrior, drops a wound off of it, 2 wounds off of it before it guts his back this way, then he comes out and around to kill Nauf, and at that point I want to get a model onto the central objective. With Nauf down and disco balls and stuff in the way, this Delamy can move out and around, actually put shotgun rounds into the Dog Warrior and put it down before ending up on the objective over here. So that's not a bad turn. In terms of what we've accomplished, we have knocked out 3 enemy models, one of whom will be back with a speedball, but still 3 enemy models down and 2 points scored. Now, points in B-Pong are not easy to come by. You have 1 point for controlling an objective, 1 point for controlling the so 1 point for controlling a console, at least one console, 1 point for controlling the objective each round. That is 6 of the available 10 points, 2 classifieds and 2 points for ending the game with a B-Pong in your opponent's half of the table. This means that small points margins add up quickly, and had I been able to, I actually would really have liked to have gotten classifieds done this turn as well. You get 2 classifieds in B-Pong, and they are some of your very few bankable points. However, mine were telemetry and HVT capture, and Aaron did not have the good graces to walk into my very limited repeater network and get spotlit. So 2 points versus nothing is still a serviceable lead going into the second round. Now, beginning of round 2, we can see where those Eclipse templates went down. We can see the Asawira hanging out behind this objective. We can see where the Govat has ended up. And Aaron is beginning his second round. And this turn, he does what he really should probably have done on the first turn, which is just send those Galwegians. Now, of course, they are better positioned to do so this turn because they've been staged by previous irregular and impetuous orders. But, yep, this one that is just up here begins the run. Comes down here, comes around here, detonates this mine by dodging it, and then comes out and around into this team here. Now, this is all going to happen in and around other stuff, so we're going to just come to this at the conclusion, but this is the play that you really wanted to make early in the game, and in fact you probably wanted to make it, in this case, even early in the turn. Doing runs like this causes your opponent to have to reveal themselves and defang their pieces to show, like, okay, where are your hidden pieces, bitch? Reveal them to me. and once they're revealed, they can be played around. It is actually a small misplay to do this run as late in the turn as Aaron did. We'll explain why as we get to the end of the turn, but otherwise Aaron does have murder to do. Aaron is well afeared of Asawira Guard, and for very good reason, and so it's the Unknown Ranger's job to deal with those pieces, and he's very able to do so. Unknown Ranger is going to come, is already moved up last turn with Tactical Awareness, comes down the stairs over here, and then spends probably 7 or 8 orders gunfighting Asawira. Now, that's not terribly unreasonable. The Asawira are linked, at least initially. He's going to see and engage the APS Spitfire first, and that's a difficult fight, right? To put down a linked Asawira Spitfire that is still benefiting from cover, even with the Unknown Ranger, is going to take time, but he does get it done, right? Many, many orders later, he's actually able to put both Asawira all the way down to dead, and again, to dead because Aaron is familiar with how Asawira play, and we're familiar with the regeneration rule and how you can be bitten by leaving them alive. And so even as we get toward like later in the order pool that is being spent by the Unknown Ranger, he's doing things like splitting his dice 3 and 1, 3 into the one surviving boarding shotgun Asawira, and then 1 into the unconscious Spitfire Asawira, because you have to put that thing down, and if you can do it efficiently, you should do so. So it takes a lot of time, kind of as it should, right? 2 Asawira, putting them all the way to dead, is a long task to accomplish. But eventually he does. Both of them go down, and that is a comfortable 70 points of my army in the dirt, albeit at considerable order expense on Aaron's part. Now, he follows up with this run with the Galwegian. The reason why doing this later, not necessarily a misplay, because you would not want to have a situation where the Unknown Ranger doesn't have any orders left, but these are different pieces in different groups. The reason why it would have been potentially advantageous to activate the Galwegians first, they're in a second combat group, is there anything that reveals to stop them while you still have a full bottle of orders in combat group 1 is running risk. Instead, the Unknown Ranger spends all of this time to deal with these pieces, and so there are not really any orders left. And in fact, Aaron at this point begins to go back and forth a little bit, just do a few more movements, try and get towards objectives, see what he can accomplish. And so it's not until almost the very last order of the turn that the Galwegian comes around here and puts a chain rifle into the Hassassin Govad. And because it is so late in the turn, as it comes out and around, as it's spending these orders with little left, I am able to reveal the Hassassin AR and drop out and take a shot of it as it comes particularly on this terminal leg. Now that shot does not actually do anything to it, but I can reveal the AR just so I get an order next turn, and the Govad is unfortunately going to go unconscious. Now, had Aaron still had any orders left to put into this firebase whatsoever, I would have been much less willing to reveal the the AR, but that is the nature of patience and ambush tactics. So in terms of the optimization of these plays, I think Aaron made the right play in terms of the runs that he made this turn. You could potentially learn to reorder these kind of things, but it's his first game as Ariadna, right? This is a very reasonable line of play. The only other notable thing that happens this turn is that the predicted speedball turns up and is used to res Nauf, which is very annoying, and I'm not necessarily going to have time to deal with him again. But as we jump into my second turn, we can see, a number of things are down and out for the count. Now, it looks like I've missed a photo. That is what it is. So what I'll do is just jump back very briefly, and I'll just run through my second turn from the state of play over here. One of the things that we're going to want to do is recover the Govad. To recover the Govad, we need to deal with the Galwegian that has made it around to this position here. I'm going to put that one on the Asawira to accomplish. Sorry, AR to accomplish, and he just has to go. What he's going to do is he's basically just going to dive for it. Start standing, move up and across here, end prone over here, and as he goes, just deal with the amount of gunfire that is coming back. Now, at this point, I think the veteran Kazakh, yes, actually, the veteran Kazakh, as the last order of the turn, has decamped. In fact, maybe that was when the AR, yes, that was when the AR revealed. It wasn't against the Galwegian at all. There's a very amusing. There was going to be an immobilized veteran Kazakh hanging out on this rooftop over here after he made a jump. Neither here nor there. I do have firepower coming in at me from the 2 models that are on this rooftop, and it's really just luck of the gods that I survive. We make a screaming run across the rooftop. We fire a bunch of emitters. There's no surprise or anything like that. Totally non-conclusive firefight, but it does get me prone on this rooftop at the end of it, at which point I'm able to poke my head around the corner prone and put a bunch of shots into the Galwegian and put it down. The chain rifle spangs, I think, as well, so this is officially the world's luckiest AR, and by taking out the Skalwegian, I am then able to land a speedball, also get a jetpack, which is going to be, well, I mean, potentially hilarious. It will do nothing, but it is very funny. And we're going to pick up a speedball, we're going to get the medikit, and Layla Sharif is going to go and recover the Govad. So Govad is back up. We can fight now again. We're probably going to. I spend a bunch of time at this juncture just trying to figure out how I can get any points on the board. The Dalami is of course unconscious. She was put down the turn before. I don't really have anything that I can easily get to this objective unless I can lay down some smoke. No problem. We're going to give that a shot. Now I've only got at this point like one command token left. I'm shepherding it pretty carefully. And so our initial plan is just to lay some smoke down in the alleyway using the Ghulam smoke grenade launcher so that I can move the alleyway hidden, the one that the Shujay names. But the Ghulam is going to fail multiple attempts to land smoke. Okay, that's fine. We'll move the Shujay out and just attempt to dodge using Bang Bomb against the Unknown Ranger. That face-to-face roll is going to fail as well. Now I pass my save, but all that lets me do is attempt to fail guts, succeed, and dodge back into cover. It does not get me onto the objective. So there is a bunch of basically faffing around this turn that does not get me anywhere that I want to go. Ideally, I would score 2 points again this turn. Right, we'd be wanting to get onto the same objective, we would wanting to get onto the central objective, score those 2 points, maybe even do a classified, because if we can do that, we're sitting on 5 points, and it's very difficult for Aaron to recover from that going into his third and final turn. As it is, all we can really do is have the Govad boom 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 around, take various kills, shoot a few things again, and then eventually come up these stairs and back down to fight and put Nauf in the dirt again. One nice thing, the Govad is really performing this game. But this is otherwise a turn in which the resources I have to play with are stretched a little bit thin. We still have a singular Shujay in hidden deployment waiting for the last turn. And so the situation is all still a little bit fragile. Still, even if I don't score any points, neither does Aaron this turn, which means going into the final round, the score is 2-0 my way. So, beginning of round 3, and Aaron needs to get some points on the board, but he has now seen 14 of 15 troops. There is still something lurking out there. You and I, of course, know that it is Shujay. But kind of regardless of what is hidden, he needs to move forward and aggress. And so that's going to be split across a couple of things this turn. The Unknown Ranger, and then the Strelok that has been hanging out basically the entire game. Nauf can't come back again, the Paramedic is too far away, it's not worth the effort. Instead, what we have are 2 lines of effort. The first is that the Unknown Ranger just goes whoop down here and gets onto the objective. He is a specialist. He's going to activate the console and shunt the B-Pong forward a couple of inches, and then the Strelok is just going to run around and stand on the B-Pong. Now, something to note, because we are playing with physical tokens in all 3 cases, they are physical objects and therefore provide cover, so the Strelok is going to be hanging out, hugging cover behind the B-Pong, but if Aaron can hold both of those positions, he's going to get 1 point for securing a console, 1 point for securing the B-Pong, 2 points for having the B-Pong on my side of the table, and as part of his move across the table, the Unknown Ranger successfully does follow-up, since he is a medium infantry, I think, and is able to... He does it off of the Dalami in his zone of control. I go into my final round. As positioned here, we can see the Unknown Ranger hanging out behind or hanging out very close to this console. We can see the Strelok that is on the B-Pong here. I go into this final round with a few options, but I do need to make everything count. For example, this is not going to be a turn for the AR to do anything cool or interesting, for example. None of the things that it might stand up to fight are some things that it's going to be relevant to deal with. For example, it can't do jack against the Frontovic using its emitter because the Frontovic is a warhorse. I could put triangulated shots into the veteran Kazakh hanging out down here, but this veteran Kazakh is not going to be significantly influential on the rest of the turn. Instead, we have to just link up the remaining Regulams and Barids and make a push toward the center. Now, there are a few things I try to do along the way to make life a little bit easier. The Govad is going to come out and around and engage the Strelok. The Strelok is going to survive, dodge, get prone behind the objective. Okay, that's fine. We're now going to reveal, in an attempt actually to get the Govad a clear line of sight again, we're going to finally reveal the second Shujay. It's going to move forward, coming out of its hiding place and running at the objective. It's going to get shot down by the Frontovic and die along the way, but it's going to attempt to press the button. Willpower 14 fails. I'd hope that would succeed, because if it succeeds, it can actually yeet the button away from the Strelok and give me a clear line of sight. But in the absence of that, we'll just do this the hard way. The NCO Ghulam and the two Barids are going to come down and around this way. They're going to lay out some smoke, come up and around. We have to get some smoke in the way of various different pieces, and they're basically just going to run it. They're just going to run in this direction, gunfighting as they go. Along the way, the Strelok actually has to try and dodge away from the rifles again, eventually ends up in a position where the Govad can shoot it once more and put it down. And there are a couple of casualties along the way. In fact, the final run is we're able to get, there is smoke down here, we're able to get up and to the objective, we flip the beacon 4 inches, and then just the two remaining Barids both run through the open through suppressive fire of the unknown ranger. He can't split burst, so that suppressive fire riddles one of the two Barids with bullets, but there's two Barids moving as part of the order, and the second Barid gets onto the objective in Aaron's half of the table. That puts the final score at 6-2 my way. That's 2 points for having the beacon in Aaron's side of the table, 1 point for controlling the beacon on the third turn, 2 points for controlling beacon and objectives on the first turn, and along the way I did telemetry by just straight up telemetrying the unconscious Strelok. Literally, it's just part of my movement up through the smoke. So that ends up being a victory for Hassassin Bahram, but it was a close fought and bloody one, and difficult and fragile kind of the entire way. I am once again left wondering why I don't just take boarding shotgun disco ball Asawira, and I think that might genuinely be a line that I look into for Hassassin Bahram. It seems like they are always the one that do the most work, and Eclipse is just incredibly valued for certain lines of play and play styles that I quite like and work well with. But the fragility of the game, I think, comes down entirely to the fact that I chose to go second after losing the lieutenant role. That is just something that is inevitably going to happen when your opponent has counter deployment and the ability to pressure and first turn aggress. Like, it's just, you are going to have a fragile game, which is why 95% of the time I recommend strongly against doing what I did in this particular game. Now, the other thing to consider as well is that Hassassin Bahram lists don't operate in a vacuum. You can build Hassassin Bahram lists that are really sound on the Alpha Strike or that thread the needle, that have offensive and defensive potential. And so while this list was kind of built in a way that sort of locked itself into going second, it really, really wanted to, and it didn't have much other choice, I think if you are playing Hassassin Bahram in an event, or even just over multiple games of casual play, you have the option of building those single or double Hassassin for day, or other just like, you can build fairly high order count, aggressive, flexible Hassassin Bahram lists, and weaving this ambush style of play into them. I think the power of this kind of game, or particularly when you're going like maybe 4 or 5 hidden deployment pieces, the power of that kind of game begins to diminish the more your opponent learns about how to play into it. If your opponent can reliably expect you to be playing that kind of list, if you are predictable, the power of that list diminishes significantly, because the shadow play, the ambush nature, the fog of war all begins to lift with experience. But more than that, your opponent begins to become aware of just how they need to defend. If you are running 2 Shujay and 2 AR, okay, that's totally fine. A relatively sensible null deployment that is not vulnerable to AR positioning, since AR, particularly the good AR profiles, are deployment zone bound, is, not particularly difficult to do. And Hassassin and Shujay, they have to reveal themselves fully to go out and press buttons. And so much of the power of pieces like double Shujay, double AR, Nadir, etc., the power of those pieces comes from the fact that your opponent cannot be certain what they are playing against and have to account for the risk of Barid pitchers, killer hackers, Hassassin for days, that kind of like painful asymmetric give up little alpha strike as one of the play options they are playing into. So for me at least, I think there are players out there who will learn to play pure ambush assassins and learn to play it very, very well. And they will develop tactics and lines of play and even potentially become comfortable with no, I'm going second, stuff you. I know how to deploy in that situation. Even become comfortable in that kind of a situation. I think with levels of expertise you could. I am not going to be able to play Hassassin Bahram alone that much. And so for me, and I would say probably most people who are seeking to play Hassassin Bahram to maximize the faction, you want to have that degree of unpredictability. You want your opponent to not be certain what it is they are playing against when, if they win the lieutenant role, they have to decide between first, second deployment, etc. I think that's probably where a significant strength of Hassassin Bahram lies, But that's a really cool strength, and it's a genuine strength because Hassassin Bahram can play all of those different aspects of the game. If they couldn't, if they were predictably locked into one style, they would be much less powerful than they are in N5, and that's just kind of a neat takeaway. Now, that wraps this particular game up. As always, hope very much that you've enjoyed this. Just as a quick plug, as a reminder, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below, or by becoming a channel member. Big thanks to everyone who has so far. Between now and next week, we might be doing a little bit of live streaming. A bunch of life admin I've had to do is now finished, and so there might be some painting live streams. I have to carefully edge a long wang. But I've also tossed around the idea of just doing some non-infinity video game live stream content. If you've gotten this far in the video and that's something you think you might be interested in, I've been thinking about RimWorld or Baldur's Gate 3, and you'd be keen to just sit down and watch a couple of hours of someone playing that and talking as they do let me know, drop a comment, because I'm just kind of interested in the audience interest in something like that. Otherwise, as usual, we'll be back next week for more Infinity content. As always, hope very much that you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.